Subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's what I need you to do before you hear the shocking story that could change the way you look at the powerful and the vulnerable. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single part of this crazy roller coaster ride. Imagine living a life where every desire is within your reach, where money isn't just a tool, it's a weapon. That's exactly what billionaire CEO Alex Turner had. He was the kind of man who could buy anything, anyone, and do anything, without consequence. His empire spanned continents. His influence was undeniable, and his life was picture perfect, or so it seemed. But behind the towering walls of luxury and success, Alex was hiding a secret so dark it could destroy everything he'd built. 10 years ago, a decision was made that would haunt him forever. A choice that, at the time, felt like a simple solution to a complicated problem. When a woman named Rachel, a bright and ambitious young woman, found herself unexpectedly pregnant with his child, Alex saw only one way out. The idea of fatherhood, especially with a woman who wasn't in his circle of power, terrified him. He offered Rachel a deal she couldn't refuse, a large sum of money to terminate the pregnancy. To him, it was just another transaction, a way to continue living his life without interruption. But little did he know, that decision would come back to bite him in ways he could never imagine. Fast forward to today, and Alex is at the peak of his success. His company is thriving, and he has everything he could ever ask for, except peace of mind. The ghosts of his past keep resurfacing, and just when he thought he could outrun them, fate has other plans. It all started with a mysterious letter, a letter that didn't just remind him of his past mistake, but shook him to his core. The letter didn't come from a lawyer or a business associate. It was from Rachel, the woman he thought he'd left behind. And this wasn't just any letter. This was a letter that would change everything. In the letter, Rachel told Alex that she had kept a secret for all these years. A secret that until now, only she knew. She had carried the child to term. Alex's son, the child he'd paid to never exist, had grown up. He was alive, and he was looking for his father. The realization hit Alex like a ton of bricks. His world, which he'd so carefully constructed, suddenly felt like it was crumbling around him. How could this be? How could Rachel have kept the child? And why, after all these years, was she coming forward now? The answers were hidden in the past, but finding them would require more than just money. It would force Alex to confront his own humanity, something he'd been running from for a decade. But the shock didn't stop there. The letter revealed something even more disturbing. Alex's son wasn't just any ordinary young man. He had grown up to be a force to be reckoned with, smart, driven, and dangerously capable. And now he wanted something from Alex. Something that could shatter his carefully curated life forever. The clock was ticking. Every decision Alex had made up until this point had been about controlling his fate, but this time, things were different. This time, he couldn't buy his way out. Rachel had left him a choice: face the consequences of his actions, or lose everything he had worked for. But Alex didn't know what was worse: the guilt of knowing he had abandoned his own flesh and blood, or the fear that his son might be out for revenge. The weight of the past hung heavy on his shoulders, and as he sat in his office, staring at the letter, he couldn't help but wonder, was this his punishment? Was this his comeuppance for thinking he could play God with someone else's life? And just as the shock was beginning to settle in, another letter arrived. This one was different. It wasn't from Rachel, but from someone else. Someone who had been watching Alex for years. Someone who knew the deepest, darkest secrets of his life. Someone who knew more about his son than he did. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, Alex realized the nightmare was only beginning. Whoever this person was, they were pulling strings that Alex had no idea existed. His world, already shaken by the revelation of his son's existence, was about to be turned upside down in ways he couldn't even begin to comprehend. Who was this mysterious figure? What did they want from Alex? And most importantly, how would Alex handle the shocking truth about his son and the price he would have to pay for his past sins? The answers were out there, waiting to be uncovered, but at what cost? The story of Alex Turner is far from over. In fact, it's just beginning. Stay tuned, because the next part of this unbelievable journey will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, guilt, and revenge. Alex Turner sat in his office, gripping the letter in his trembling hands. The world outside his towering glass windows carried on as usual. Cars honking, people rushing, the city alive with ambition. But inside, everything had changed. His past, the one he had buried under wealth and power, had clawed its way back to the surface. His son, his flesh and blood, alive. He couldn't stop his mind from racing. A decade ago, he had been so sure, so convinced that he was making the right choice. He was young, ambitious, and at the peak of his career. A child would have complicated everything. He remembered Rachel's face when he made the offer, the way her hand shook when she took the money. He never looked back, never checked in, never cared. He assumed it was done, that part of his life erased. But now it wasn't just Rachel reaching out. Someone else knew, someone who had been watching, someone who had waited for this moment. The second letter sat on his desk, unopened, mocking him. Alex inhaled sharply and tore it open. You can't run from the past, Alex. Your son is closer than you think. He knows about you. And soon, the whole world will too. A chill ran down his spine. The words weren't a warning. They were a promise. For the first time in years, Alex felt powerless. He had spent his life building walls, keeping everything under control. But this was different. He had no idea who was behind the letter. No idea what his son wanted. No idea what was coming. His assistant, Claire, knocked hesitantly before stepping inside. Sir, you have a meeting in 10 minutes. Alex barely registered her voice. He stared at the paper, his mind clouded with questions. Should he respond? Should he ignore it? But deep down, he knew. Ignoring it wouldn't make it go away. Cancel it, he muttered. Claire blinked. The meeting? Yes, Alex snapped, rubbing his temples. Just clear my schedule for the day. Claire hesitated, then nodded and quietly exited. Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration bubbling under his skin. He needed answers, and he knew exactly where to start. Rachel. It had been 10 years, but tracking her down wouldn't be hard. His resources were limitless. Within an hour, his private investigator sent him an address, an old apartment complex on the outskirts of the city, a far cry from the penthouses and mansions he was used to. That evening, he drove himself there, his heart pounding with something unfamiliar. Guilt, fear, regret. He wasn't sure, but he knew one thing. Rachel had the answers he needed. The door opened before he could even knock. Rachel stood there, older but still the same. Her sharp eyes studied him. Unreadable, she didn't look surprised to see him. Took you long enough, she said flatly, stepping aside. Alex hesitated before entering. The apartment was small but warm. A few framed pictures sat on a bookshelf. He recognized her in some of them, but his eyes landed on one in particular, a boy, dark hair, familiar sharp jawline. eyes that mirrored his own. His chest tightened. Rachel watched him. "So, you got my letter." Alex turned to her. "Why now?" Rachel crossed her arms. "Because he's looking for you." His stomach dropped. "He knows." She nodded. "I never told him at first. I thought maybe it was better if he didn't know who his father was. But as he got older, he started asking questions. He's smart, Alex. He put the pieces together, and then someone else reached out to him." Alex tensed. "Who?" Rachel sighed. "That, I don't know. But someone's been feeding him information about you, about your company, about the past. And now he wants to meet you." The room felt suffocating. "What does he want?" Alex asked, his voice quieter now. Rachel's gaze didn't waver. "You'll have to ask him yourself." The words hit him, harder than he expected. He had spent years pretending this boy didn't exist. And now he was supposed to face him. What would he even say? Rachel exhaled, her expression softening for the first time. "He's not a kid anymore, Alex. He's a young man. And he's not coming to you for money or favors. He just wants the truth." Alex swallowed hard. The truth. The truth was ugly. The truth was that he had paid to erase him. "Where is he now?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Rachel hesitated. "He's been close. Closer than you think." Alex's breath hitched. That second letter. "Your son is closer than you think." A realization settled over him. He wasn't just being watched. His son had already found a way into his world. And just as that thought struck him, his phone buzzed. A message, unknown number. "See you soon, Dad." His blood ran cold. He looked up at Rachel, but she was already staring at him, as if she knew exactly what had just happened. The walls around him weren't just closing in, they were crumbling. And for the first time in his life, Alex Turner had no idea how to stop it. Alex stared at the message on his phone, his heart pounding. "See you soon, Dad." The words felt like a punch to the gut. His son wasn't just watching from a distance. He was making his move. But what did that mean? Was he here for revenge? For answers? Or something else entirely? Rachel was still watching him. Her expression, unreadable. "He reached out, didn't he?" Alex exhaled sharply. "Yeah," she nodded, as if she expected it. "Then I guess it's time." Time for what? Alex wasn't sure, but he knew he couldn't avoid this any longer. That night, he barely slept. His mind was a battlefield of regrets and worst-case scenarios. By morning, he was running on caffeine and anxiety, waiting for something, anything to happen. Then, it did. His assistant, Claire, rushed into his office, looking pale. "Sir, there's someone here to see you. He says he's your son." Alex's stomach dropped. He barely managed to nod before she stepped aside, and then he saw him. The young man standing in the doorway wasn't a stranger. Not really. He had Alex's sharp features, his piercing eyes. But there was something else too. A quiet confidence. A strength Alex wasn't sure he had ever possessed. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, the young man stepped forward. "I'm Ethan." Ethan. Alex had never known his name before. He had spent 10 years pretending this boy didn't exist. And now here he was, standing in front of him. Real. Alex swallowed hard. He didn't even know where to start. An apology? An excuse? What could he possibly say? Ethan studied him. "You look nervous." Alex let out a short, humorless laugh. "That obvious?" "Yeah." Ethan's lips pressed together. "Good. You should be." Alex nodded slowly. He deserved that. Ethan sat down across from him, arms crossed. I'm not here to ruin your life, if that's what you're thinking. Alex didn't respond. He wasn't sure he believed that yet. I just want to know, Ethan continued, his voice steady but firm. Why? Alex exhaled, running a hand down his face. He had spent a decade burying this, convincing himself it was just another decision, one that didn't matter. But now, looking at the son he had abandoned, he knew that was a lie. I was scared, Alex admitted, the words bitter in his mouth. I thought a child would ruin my career, my life. I told myself it was the right thing to do. Ethan's jaw clenched. The right thing? You paid my mother to erase me. Alex flinched. There it was. The truth, raw and unforgiving. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Ethan pulled something from his pocket and placed it on the desk. A letter. Alex frowned. What's this? Ethan leaned back. The person who sent you that other letter. They sent me this. Alex hesitated before opening it. As he read, his blood ran cold. Alex Turner thinks he owns the world. He thought he could erase his past. He thought he could buy his way out of responsibility. He doesn't deserve forgiveness. And he doesn't deserve you. Alex clenched his jaw. Who sent this? Ethan shook his head. I don't know. But they wanted me to hate you. Alex swallowed hard. Do you? Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched Alex, as if trying to decide. Finally, he said, I don't know yet. It wasn't the answer Alex wanted, but it was honest. Ethan sighed, his shoulders tense. I didn't come here looking for a father. I've been fine without you. I don't need your money. I don't need your guilt. Alex's chest tightened. Then why are you here? Ethan met his eyes. Because I needed to see for myself. I needed to know if you were worth forgiving. The words hung between them, heavy and uncertain, for the first time in his life, Alex didn't have control. He couldn't buy his way out. He couldn't manipulate the outcome. He could only sit there, waiting for Ethan to decide if he was worth anything at all. Ethan stood. I don't know if I'll ever call you Dad, but maybe I'll call you again someday. It wasn't much, but it was something. As Ethan walked out, Alex felt something shift inside him. He had spent his whole life chasing power, control, success, but none of it mattered as much as the chance, the small, fragile chance, that one day his son might look at him and see something more than a mistake. And for the first time in 10 years, Alex Turner realized that was the only thing he truly wanted.